It's been a long time. I shouldn't have left you. This is Dr. Jason Johnson. Three things. Thank you so much for joining me today. Yes, it has been a long time. I've been traveling around. I had a speech to give at St. John's Prep in Philadelphia. Shout out to St. John's Prep. I had Roy Okupe, who's the creator of Iyanu, the #1 Cartoon Network African-centered cartoon, whatever it is. I had him brought to my school. I've been busy, but we have three things for this week on today, which is a special day, which is No King's Day. So three topics that I'm going to hit on today real quick before I have to run out and participate in what's happening in this country. And I'll tell you all really quick. For those of you who haven't joined yet, please like, subscribe, and share. For people who don't know, I spend about the first minute, I say what my three topics are, and then you see those either on Blue Sky or Twitter. I'm gonna call it Twitter. My mama called it Twitter. I'm never gonna change. Or you'll see it on Instagram. But the full clip can be on my YouTube page at Dr. Jason Johnson. Please like, subscribe, and share. So three things that I'm gonna talk about today. This has been a crazy couple weeks, and I hate to be like the person who's like this week in racism, but topic number one is the MAGA Blexit movement, right? I am recording this the day after the start of FAMU's homecoming, where these MAGA Blexit people are supposedly going. I'm going to tell you what, where, why these folks are doing this, why you need to be careful. Number two, I'm going to talk a little bit about the political story that dropped this week about all these racist chats that are happening within the Republican Party, especially young Republicans, which you shouldn't be surprised about. And then three, I'm going to talk a little bit about No Kings, why it's important, why people need to be out there, and why it matters. So, starting off, number one. Oh my gosh. So this is the thing about MAGA Blexit, and I think this is important to understand for context. And I'm always very candid with you all. I'm always very candid with the audience about what I do and do not say, what I will and will not sort of talk about. The last 3 weeks have been, 3 weeks, month, whatever it is in this country, have been very, very, very interesting. And I think it's important to point out that Turning Point, which is a sort of conservative movement organization that traveled around college campuses for years and engaged in sort of events, didn't have a real history of going to HBCUs. Didn't, right? Maybe individuals did, but they didn't go to HBCUs as a whole. So it's very interesting that somehow suddenly in the last month or so, you have all these people who are interested in going to HBCUs to challenge the students there on their belief system. Black students who had nothing to do with anything that magically, it's just random, right? It seems out of the blue. I can speak specifically about Morgan State University, where we've had 2 bomb threats, a shooting threat and a bomb threat over the last month. Suddenly. Don't know why. Nobody at Morgan State was involved. These are just students trying to go through and do homecoming. So the big thing that you've probably seen that dropped about a week ago is there's a MAGA Blexit thing. You've got, was it Natasha Craven and Craig Long and this failed rapper named Topher. You have these black MAGA people who've decided that they're going to go on a tour of HBCUs throughout the country to challenge and engage, right? And they primarily seem to want to do this during homecoming. You can see it sort of on the cover. I'm kind of pointing to these people and what they're doing and the hows and wheres and the whys. Here's what's important to understand about this. And most folks, most black folk get the assignment. These people are just content creators. They're not interested in engaging students. They're not going to campuses and saying, hey, here's a flyer about how the Republican Party or Donald Trump is going to help you with your student loans or improve education or improve your life in general. They're not doing any of that. They're only going to these campuses because they want to rile people up and then get viral content. That's it. That's the goal. That's the whole lesson. There's nothing else to it. But what's been interesting, and I think the thing that everybody needs to remember about this, is it is a reflection of the overall disrespect that the hard right and even their sort of black acolytes have for black institutions as a whole. We saw what happened at Tennessee State, where 2 white MAGA folks a couple weeks ago showed up on campus and kind of got chased off, and they tried to use it to create viral content. The reason they got chased off is they didn't ask for permission. You can't just walk onto a college campus. You can't just set up a table and say, debate me, bro, and expect people to interact with you. There's security questions. There's safety questions. There's common sense questions. The students who are on these campuses, they pay tuition to have that campus maintained. They can't just have anybody walk up in there. There are college campuses in this country where the military can't show up. There's college campuses where the Sierra Club can't come up there and get donations. So why does MAGA think that they can just show up on an HBCU campus and run an event. And what's telling about this, while we know that it's not sincere, we know that it's not dedicated to black folks, we know that it's just some way of sort of trying to put Turning Point in a position where they can provoke and use that as an excuse to attack HBCUs. Also bear in mind this, if you look at their Blexit website, they still ain't got no information. Not one of these people, not Topher, not Craven, not Craig Long, not one of these people as of this recording that I have seen and I have looked at with my graduate students in journalism have made an announcement about any of this. They selling wolf tickets and I don't see no fur anywhere around, right? They want to show up to these campuses, but they haven't bothered to call Bowie State. They haven't bothered to call Howard. I dare you to show up on Howard's campus during homecoming week and show up on the yard and you haven't registered. And you haven't established where you're going to have your table. So just understand, MAGA Blexit is never about black people. It is about performing violence against black people and exploiting black people for conservative, racist, white audiences. And those conservative, racist, white audiences are there. They will pay you. They will sponsor you. They will give you all sorts of support as long as you are willing to put yourself in a position of attacking black people. Which brings us to topic number 2, the political story this week, which shouldn't have been a shock to anybody, that there are a large number of young Republicans and Republican state senators and young Republican groups across the country. They were on this huge Telegram chat and were saying terrible racist things. They were talking about putting people in gas chambers. They were talking about referring to black people as the watermelon people. They were talking about all sorts of violence and how they like slavery and how they support Hitler and all these sorts of things. And of course, Vice President J.D. Vance, who is generally kind of spineless, comes out and says, oh, these are just young people joking and they're edgelording, et cetera, et cetera. You know, to paraphrase the famous poet, like, racism is about wasting your time. I'm not going to argue as to whether or not this stuff is racist. We all know it's racist. That's not really my issue. I think what's important about this as far as the coverage and for you to know and you to understand is it relates to these Blexit people. They are not performing for just conservatives. These people are Nazis. These people are supporters of Nazi philosophy. These people are supportive of extermination of people. You can't pretend and play that you're going to make jokes about gas chambers and then turn around and say, well, I was just edgelording. Everybody has made an offensive joke from time to time, and especially in a text chat with friends, but you're not talking about gas chambers. You're not talking about holocausts. You're not talking about exterminating different groups of people. And that's what these folks have done. And the vast majority of, you see in the Political article, it's not like any of them are denying that what they were saying is true. No one has said that they're like, oh, well, there might be altered. No, most of them are like, yeah, I was kind of saying it, but it shouldn't have ever been exposed one way or another. So I say this to say, if you're going to go perform on an HBCU campus, you're performing for these kinds of people. You're performing for people who don't want black folks or Asian folks or Southeast Asian or Hispanic people. They don't want them in America at all. They're not interested in having anybody in this country who is not straight and white and someone who they can subject to their power. Not to mention the fact, if you look at most of the guys who are doing this, is like, yeah, y'all need all the power you can because you ain't got no charm, you ain't got much looks. But I also say this because it's important about how this is covered. Anybody who does any coverage, and I tend to avoid coverage that I think is bad or silly on mainstream television networks or anything else like that. Anybody who says that this is an outlier is lying. Anybody who's sold themselves on the lie that as we get older and new generations will be more progressive. No, most of these people were in their 20s and 30s. So it's not like racism is disappearing. It's not like violence and these attitudes have been eradicated. They haven't been. They've just metastasized and grown themselves into a new generation. And that's what everybody needs to understand. The political story isn't important because it told us something new. The political story isn't even important because it told us something that's bigger than we thought it was, at least not me, because I've known about this stuff for a long time. The political story is important because it says that a mainstream news outlet is finally admitting and acknowledging, oh yeah, this is the norm now. This is what the Republican Party is. And as I've said many times on MSNBC, the Republican Party doesn't exist. It died 10 years ago. It's now a dime store front for a terrorist organization called MAGA. You heard me, a dime store front for a terrorist organization called MAGA. And the goals of MAGA are very much aligned with techno-authoritarians and Nazism and extermination of different kinds of people. That is what they're saying. That is not the outlier. That is not a small percentage. This is their young, up and coming members of their party, and there's very little condemnation from the leaders of their party, from people like J.D. Vance. So anyone who can go to a campus and claim loyalty or wanting to be associated with these people is associating themselves with terrorism and associating themselves with Nazi sentiment. That's it. That's the conversation. And any other conversation besides that, and anyone who tries to play footsie with the current incarnation of the Republican Party, and whether that's some centrist Republican, or whether that's some Democrat who's like, we got to understand how MAGA feels, or whether it's Stephen A. Smith, I don't care. That is what you're associating yourself with. And there's no middle ground on that as far as I'm concerned. So the last thing is this, real quick. Today is No King's Day. It's Saturday, October 18th, so it's No King's Day. I did a segment earlier this week with Antonia Hilton on MSNBC, I think it was Monday, and we talked about the fact that she's like, hey, the president's trying to send out National Guard. Should people be worried? Should people be afraid? And I told her, nobody going to No King should be any more concerned than I am as a journalist and a college professor when the current administration has said that the journalists are the enemies of the state and that college universities are terrible places. This is the world we live in. It's actually important that people go out and protest. You don't have to protest. It's not a requirement that you protest. But I've said all along, you have to, in any way possible, make it clear that you're unhappy with how this country operates. If the no protest movements came every 4 weeks, every month, or something else like that, that does exhaust this administration. That lets them know that people are not passive. They're not comfortable with this. This is not just about voting rights. This is about ICE kidnapping people off the streets. This is about cryptocurrency being used to bankrupt this country. This is about people's rights being violated. This is about this administration ignoring judges' rulings time after time. This is about this administration snatching back money that's been pledged by Congress to different agencies just because they feel like it. This is about this administration holding hundreds of millions of Americans' healthcare hostage just because they want to give more money to crypto bros. That is why people are protesting today. And if you count yourself amongst that number, great. And if you don't, it's okay if you don't. But if you're unhappy with what's happening in this country, you should find some way to participate. Share a hashtag, hand out some water, honk when you drive by these people when they're standing somewhere. I don't tell folks where I'm going to be. It's a safety issue. But if you care about this country, this is the kind of participation you need to show. And if anyone, I'll say this quickly, if anyone is still in that ridiculous nonsense of, well, I'm a citizen, I don't have to worry about this, all you got to do is look at Chicago. They're grabbing black folk. They're grabbing people who are American citizens. They're beating folks up. They're disappearing teenagers, girls and boys, and they're asking questions later. If you don't want that to be your country, number one, avoid any and all MAGA people who show up on your campuses and recognize that it's disrespect and exploitation. Number two, recognize that racism is not a feature. It is not a bug. It is a feature. It is the driving force, that misogyny of the current iteration of the Republican organization, because they're no longer a party. And three, if you're not out protesting today, find your own way to protest. It's your country. It's my country. We got to keep it safe. It's Jason Johnson. 3 things.